This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. This is your co-host, Notorious Rob, and as always with me, the fabulous Greg Robertson.
Hola, Rob.
Hola. Welcome back.
Oh man, it was a long week. I mean, I went out there for Saturday, and then was scheduled to go back on Wednesday morning, but my son got accepted to a few colleges out there, a couple in Boston, so I had him fly out, and we went and toured Emerson in Boston.
Yep.
And then we didn't really get back until Friday.
Yeah.
So that was a long ass flight back, and a week gone from the fam.
Yeah.
And it took me all weekend just to getting back on schedule from the late nights and everything else from mid-year. But it's all
so
good.
Emerson, I think that's where the anti-Jewish rallies and protests were going on.
Well, you mean every college in the country? Yeah.
Except Texas A&M.
They booed Jerry Seinfeld at a Duke. I mean, who boos Jerry Seinfeld?
I walked out. Yeah, no, except Texas A&M, according to my son. I asked him about it. I was like, nah, that's a UT Austin thing. That's I was like, all right, I like A&M even more now. So where's he look? So let's talk about this.
Okay. So he's into film, right? So his things are, he's got accepted to the California College of Arts, which is up in San Francisco. He got accepted to Emerson, which is a top 5 film school. Right. He got accepted to NYU, which is the number 2.
Ooh.
And we still haven't. He's on the wait list for Chapman, which is number 3. And in Orange County, right? So there's that.
Sure.
And then we're waiting to hear from SC. So if it's USC, that's the top film school, and that's 45 minutes away from us.
Yeah.
So you can guess what Jen and I are hoping for. We'll see what happens.
Send it to NYU, man.
Yeah, I mean, there is a thing like getting out of the. I mean, the guy's got to grow up, right?
Not only that, but I feel like every young person should experience New York City.
Yeah, he was there for a senior trip and loved it. I mean, he loves the city. So
it's a totally. Like, I wouldn't want to live there anymore. It's probably turned to shit, but there is something about New York. When you're young, you don't have a lot of responsibilities. It's okay to be impoverished.
Yeah.
New York is, there's something about that place.
I kind of agree with you. I mean, he's just like an Orange County kid, though. He's got no experience of anything.
I know, but that's, he'll learn, get mugged a few times, like deal with stepping over homeless people, mugged. The cold, right? The cold in the winter.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the snow, the slush. Toughen up.
Yep.
So, in any event, all right. Well, congratulations. I understand we have to make some updates to the murder board.
You're right. Let me get my pointer out here. So, the murder board is now being adjusted. So, Redfin, if anybody didn't read, was now has, and this had to been the toughest check Glenn Kelman ever wrote in his life, to be lumped in with the rest of the real estate community, right?
Yep.
Join the settlement to, I think it was 9.5 million.
9.5 million. And I do want to point something out. You're right. It probably was the hardest check for him to write, but that is a fraction of their cash reserves. Right? So it almost feels like Glenn went in, talked to the lawyers, was like, listen, if anybody's been trying to get commissions low, it's me. It's us here at Redfin. I can't believe we're roped into this.
He did the full GFK.
Right?
I can just see it now. It's like,
and I think they said, yeah, you're right. Look, we're going to have to make you pay something, but how about 9.5? Like real low. Because you're right. I mean, Glenn's got to be pissed.
Glenn is the guy that will not come the day before to a speaking gig because he doesn't want to pay the extra hotel night.
Right.
He'll risk it and come. I mean, he is so conscious of that stuff.
Yeah.
Again, this had to been just And
considering the battles that he's been with NAR, with MLSs, right? And then as soon as this thing dropped, he left NAR, he quit. Yeah. So for them to be like, we're gonna get you on the NAR settlement. Our hearts go out to you, Glenn. But I think if you read between the lines, this amount says that the lawyers kind of got it,
Yeah.
It was almost a slap on the wrist, shall we say, for Redfin.
Yeah. Well, 9.5 million slap on the wrist.
Okay, agreed. But considering how much like actual cash they had in the bank, it feels like an understanding was reached. So, but they are off the murder board. So EXP is the last big one.
Yeah, I think so. God, and I always thought they did, but I guess they haven't. So I mean, something's going on. We'll see.
Douglas Elliman, have they settled? I think.
I think they did settle. We have them on here.
Yes,
we have them on here. But remember, they're part of the 2 billion club, not the major franchise kind of thing. So it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
All right. So what are you going to do with the murder board when EXP settles? Like, are you going to start putting little?
There's always controversies here, right? We're going to put on here's a picture of you and Anthony. That's what we're going to put.
Oh boy.
That's for later, though. We'll
exactly. All right. So, so you did end up at mid-year.
Yeah.
We used to do these like post-inmin shows and mid-year shows. Like, what was that like? Did brokers show up? Number one. That was the question.
I mean, again, my purview was basically talking to a ton of MLS execs.
Sure.
And some vendors too, right? That came to our stuff there. And I will tell you, and you could read this in some of Andrea's reporting, right? I'm not. I think they're more confused when they left than when they showed up.
Oh boy,
in a sense, because it's like they come and say, "Well, you realize NAR that if this and this happen, then that's going to cause this," and that they had some valid, I think, arguments to make about how do you don't understand how this works. How are we going to make this work, right? And it's just like, deal with it. Godspeed.
Right.
This is what it is. We're just doing this.
Right.
And then to me, that that quote that I made with the Godspeed was on the we talk, and you and I is very, again, one of our topics is just jumps out off the YouTube screen of enforcement of this of the buyer showing agreement, right? And you were pretty bold in saying fuck it, just ignore it, right? And the way that they when I read the article of NAR is basically going to say, well, you, the MLS, have to enforce this. Good luck.
You
can decide. Godspead. You can decide whether or not to, look at those agreements or not. Up to you. It almost felt like a little side eye or a little wink of giving them an, we're not saying you have to look at every buyer agreement. Hey, that's up to you, right? It almost was like they were agreeing with Rob Hahn.
I mean, because I'm right.
Well, I mean, then you heard from a whole other thing, in the comments was, well, I'm going to be doing it if some other agent is doing. I'm ratting them out, really quickly. So then it becomes, well, what we talked about, pay the fine. Well, a lot of people pointed out to me later on, it's like, hey, I know Rob says just pay the fine, but typically the MLS fines are like, it's a little fine, a big fine, and then you're out. Right. If it's a repeat offense there. So they might have some more teeth to this enforcement than maybe we thought.
But so let's visit this, right? Because I saw a bunch of posts, a bunch of comments on my ignore it post, right? And the first one I saw was something like, well, when the fine is $5,000, right?
Yeah.
You put a stop to this immediately. I'm like, okay, here's the thing. I remember working for a large regional MLS. Who shall remain nameless.
Right.
Way they did their enforcement, though, was very interesting. They used the local associations to do the enforcement. Okay. So one of the major problems that they had that I got called in to consult on was they were having what I would like to call rules arbitrage, where one association would be like, we're not really going to enforce those rules. Where another association like, this is what, like, we're going to enforce it. And they started losing hundreds of people to the association that was saying, we are going to be very lax.
That's, what, you got to love capitalism, right?
Well, of course. And I said, okay, so given that, say you're the MLS to say, we're going to be real strict about this $5,000 fine. Okay, your neighboring MLS is like, you know what? $20. I mean, you're telling me that you're not going to see brokers go, hey, should we stay in the MLS that's going to be fucking totalitarian, authoritarian China, or should we go to libertarian MLS over here? Like, really? I mean, maybe they'll start out that way. I kind of feel like let's see how that plays out.
Yeah,
that's number one.
Okay,
right.
Go ahead.
Number two, but the bigger thing, I suppose, was, all right, let's say you're an MLS, you say, we want to enforce this. Cool. It's enforcement free. Like, is your compliance department hanging around, twiddling their thumbs? Oh, thank God we have some work to do. Okay, if that's not the case, how are you going to pay for this? Right? And that was my whole thing. Is I thought NAR should have just said, yes, MLSs, we need you to enforce this, but we have $40 million to distribute to help you with this enforcement method. They didn't do that. They're like, Godspeed. I'm going, okay,
the image I get is like, they get branded cars and there's a fucking guy with a yellow armband who like is outside of active listings just with their clipboard ready for the fucking agent with their binoculars, right? Yeah. I think I made a signature out.
Sure. No, people are like, well, it'll be based on a reporting thing. Okay, fine. It's reporting thing. Fine, right? Okay, I'm an MLS. Some agent calls in with so-and-so showed a home without a written buyer agreement. Do I ignore it? Do I just go, well, I now got to follow up, right? So like minimum, I got to write an email to some broker, some agent, hey, we have a report. And then, there's the procedures, right? You got to go into whatever.
Yeah.
None of that shit is free. So I'm like, okay, so is the local MLS then going to say, okay, let's raise our dues, right? Like, I'm like, for what? To benefit NAR?
Basically an unfunded mandate.
Unfunded mandate. And no one wants to deal with that aspect. I'm like, so I was hoping at mid-year, the professionals, the executives are running these, like, would have raised that. It's like, hey, that's cool. Like, yeah, Godspeed. That's great. But y'all paying us? You guys reimbursing us for any? No? Then why are we doing this?
Yeah.
For your insurance coverage? Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
No one has as yet explained that one to me clearly.
Well, one thing that I think, not one thing, but a couple things here is a lot of agents have told me, like, there are just agents out there that you think their full-time job is to rat on people.
Of course.
Right. So you're going to have to deal with those guys and they never shut up. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the MLS exec I talked to, some of them, is the fear of the DOJ is fucking real. So
sure.
They are going to enforce because they do not want to be on the wrong side of all this shit. So whether they have it's not an unfunded mandate or whatever,
right?
They are going to be very serious about enforcing this rule because they don't want fucking DOJ in their ass. They've been paying $250,000, $500,000 in fucking legal fees, and they don't want to be back in that camp again, right? So there is a real fear out there from the MLSs of getting on the wrong side of this.
We should probably have another show because I don't know we're gonna get into today, but I strongly suspect the DOJ's come after them anyway.
Well, okay, but why give them some fresh meat?
No, what I mean is like fresh meat or not. Like you're like, well, we're gonna enforce these rules. Well, it's not like I said. Like we've talked about a million times, right? I don't think the DOJ is cool with this.
Well, I don't think the DOJ thinks this goes far enough.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think they're so.
No, I mean,
we're enforcing the settlement agreement. The DOJ's like, we don't give a shit because we're not cool with the settlement agreement. Well, we're just not going to do anything about it now.
I think the DOJ is basically okay. At least we got a win here. It's not everything we want. Let them fucking go do this.
Yeah.
Right. And then we'll come back with what we really want. Right.
Next year.
Yeah. But I mean, if you add to that the MLSs aren't enforcing what it was before, you're asking for a whole fucking another round of headache.
I don't see it.
I think so. I
don't know. They should all go ask their $1,200 hour lawyer. I just don't think that's
their lawyers saying to them, enforce everything, or
Of course, but because lawyers are the ones who are telling them to get out of the room, which I suppose we should address.
Well, okay, so my prediction is this will be heavily enforced.
Okay,
right. For all the reasons I said. So
okay,
that would be my take on it.
And you're probably very right because to your point, the execs are just like, okay, what do we do? Well, just enforce. Okay, they know how to do that. Who pays for it? That's their problem. Their board will figure that shit out. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's fine. I think it's a mistake, but whatever. Do what you want, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not going to matter in the end. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me. I mean, again, the other way of looking at this is just to show how ridiculous it is, or something. Is that they try to do this as forcefully as possible and show how it just chokes the market out, and they can show some data to somebody to say,
I mean, like we talked about when we first addressed this about the Zillow showing thing, the showing agreement. Like the whole purpose of this was like, look, you want to try and create, like, you don't want to create friction, right? You just don't want to create friction. Like, and the goal behind all of this buyer agent agreement, et cetera, like I said, was somebody being surprised, like, wait, I have representation. What do you mean? You're my agent? What? Like that's what it is. So to me, it's like, okay, you want to comply with the rules, and it's going to be this incredibly uncomfortable, nasty experience for the consumer. They're just going to stop, right?
Well, yeah, okay. Let me go back.
Like ultimately, the consumer dictates things. Like the idea that somehow the DOJ or NAR or the MLS is going to dictate stuff, and like, no, the market does as the markets will, right? And if you make it incredibly difficult for buyers to tour homes without going through some rigmarole, they're going to find some other way.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to make it easier for consumers. Ultimately,
you just have an open house 24 hours a day.
You have an open house 24 hours a day, whatever. But you have to make it easier for buyers, especially in this environment when buyers are drying up because interest rates going to be over 10%. Pretty soon. Like, so I just don't like. You could try and do this with bureaucratic bullshit with rules and all this stuff. Like, look, like, can we just acknowledge that fundamentally you have to make things easier for buyers without being unfair to them, without taking advantage, without doing all the other whatever bad stuff. And as we talked about, I think most competent buyer agents will just sit down with the buyer, explain the process, and like, let me help you. Like, so no problem there. It's just, okay, so we're talking about the random showing situation, the random, like, I have an invite from whatever, I have a request from Zillow, right, to go show this home tonight at 7. The showing agents are going to figure that out. And there's, if they're going to jump through 17 hoops, and more importantly, make the consumer jump through 17 hoops, consumer will find somebody else.
Yeah. The other thing I'm thinking of is like, if what you say is true, which I believe is that the DOJ is going to come back with something else. I mean, it could be a negotiation too. It's like, okay, you know what? You've got this whole list of things you want still to be done. Can we take away this thing?
Right.
It's a chip in that game, right? That could be used later, but we'll see how quickly that happens.
Yeah, who knows? So that's really.
There was a rumor going around, actually, now that I think of this, is that the DOJ was issuing some CIDs. Is that what it is?
Yes. Confirmed.
And it is confirmed? Okay. So things are moving already, right? So we'll see what happens.
Like I said, I think there's going to be CIDs. I think they will investigate. I don't think they will do anything until the election.
Right.
That has been my prediction, and I could be totally wrong, man. Right.
Well, the prediction really, I think, is they're not going to do anything to stop this from getting basically handled, right?
Right. And I was
until it gets implemented, right? That was what everybody's kind of saying.
Yeah.
Not everybody,
I want to say I just saw a picture that was really relevant to this. Oh, God. It was a recent Biden rally. And I remember like the whole stage. I can't find it anymore. I should have saved it. But the whole stage, like the backdrop, the sign, the big sign was something like making housing affordable. And I think this is when Biden announced that they were going to offer, I think, $400 a month to first-time home buyers.
Okay.
Have you heard this?
No.
All right, hold on a second. $400 a month, first-time home.
I've heard he had some sort of proposal for first-time home buyers, but I don't remember that amount.
$15,000 first-time home buyer tax credit act. I can't remember. Anyway, so the point being, he announced this at a rally. And the rally, the imagery is all like Biden standing in front of like a big sign, like making housing affordable. So I don't really think the DOJ is going to do anything until the election. Right.
Right.
After the election, I could see them coming back. right? And coming back pretty hard. And at that point, whether this showing whatever buyer, whatever thing, and to me, this is all kind of irrelevant at this point.
Yeah, and I
you
don't
got to
think there's
do it. You got to
anything
obey. You know, you got to comply.
I don't think there's anything in the Constitution that says the sitting president can't be in jail, right? So, I mean, show me that. I don't think there's anything in the Constitution.
I mean, he could. Yeah, but here's the thing: he could just pardon himself, so he won't be sitting in jail.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Isn't the Supreme's working on that right now, as far as figuring whether he's got the total immunity?
No, it's in the Constitution, so you know.
So it's a dominus ominous, man, and I'm out. Can a priest bless himself and then he's good?
This is why I become a monarchist. All right, it's time to bring back kings. But all right, so there is one thing I think we kind of have to address. Were you in the room? Were you in the meeting when the MLS execs walked out?
I was not, but I will tell you this. I was forwarded an email that an MLS exec who was in the meeting.
Right.
So this is not hearsay or whatever else. Is that email went to Charlie and said, listen, I was in this meeting and this guy started spouting off about steering. And I left the meeting saying, as I was instructed.
Right.
So I know it happened. I have an exchange from a ML exec to Charlie about this, right? So I think this has been confirmed. Now, I don't know what he said. I don't know verbatim what he said. I don't think even Mr. LaMacchia knows what he said, right? I think he said that in his video. He said, well, I wasn't sure the words I was using, but it was whatever he was saying was weird. It was enough to cross the line where Charlie Lee gets on, the NAR attorney gets on stage to go, hold on a second, right? So, I mean, that's an indicator to me, but I don't know.
Did he actually say that? I mean, again, I wasn't there. There's no video, right? So did Charlie Lee actually say, hold on a second?
I don't know what he said, but he got on stage.
I've heard he was like nearly sprinting down the aisle to get there. But here's the thing. So that resulted in a little, minor drama. I understand that the man made a 30-minute video, and I'm like, dude, y'all need a life. Like, here's the thing. Like, the whole thing is just complete embarrassing, for NAR that this guy's an actual leader. He's embarrassing for him, but whatever. I don't really want to talk about him. I don't want to talk about any of that. However, there is a very interesting thing that we should probably talk about because it's really substantive. And I got this from one of my readers, actually multiple readers, right? Which is they agree to the extent that if you use the threat of steering to get the seller to pay up, that is going to be part of steering, right? Like steering isn't simply the buyer agent, saying to the buyer, like, don't look at that house because it's not paying enough. Steering also includes when the listing agent uses the threat of that to say, hey, you better offer compensation or else.
Yeah,
right.
Works both ways.
Effectively what LaMacchia has said on multiple occasions, that I've like put video on, right? However, what my readers point out is, but there is a scenario though, as a listing agent, you do have a fiduciary duty to tell your client when the decisions they make could impact the sale of their home. And one of those decisions could be whether they offer compensation or not. So the topic is, what is the difference between the threat of steering in an illegitimate way, which is steering as well, and being transparent and informing your client, right?
As a fiduciary.
And I think that's a really, really excellent point. And I do think it's not like an easy, simple pat thing, right? Because I feel pretty comfortable in saying that what I've heard to date LaMacchia say on videos, on panels, and TV shows is in fact steering. It is, in fact, using the threat of steering to sort of bully your seller to offer more, to pay up. I do think and this is where I think words matter, the way you speak matters, the delivery matters, everything matters at that point, right? But I do think that there is a case to be made that as a legitimate listing agent, you do have a fiduciary duty to inform your seller, right, as to what could happen. What's your take on that?
That's a fine line. Now, when you're describing this to me, I'm thinking from the the standpoint of being a writer.
Okay.
Right. So how do I write about this? How do I write like, well, I can't say it this way. You know, sometimes when we write something is like, oh, I don't want to come up across this way. How do I say this?
Right.
But I'm going to give it either some additional context or something where I'm going to get my point across, but I don't really cross that line.
Right.
That's tough, man. I mean, you're talking about, one of the things that I find tough for myself, and I'm a bit more of this than you is it reminds me of satire.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Satire has to be, there's just enough truth in it to make it funny. Right. But you can't, it's a fine line of going from satire to like, truth, or satire to like just complete ridiculousness. Right.
Sure.
So you don't know. It's really hard sometimes. Like, is this what, what are we talking about here?
Right.
I don't know man, it's tough. I don't know how you kind of draw that line. I mean, I see what you're saying. So I'm talking to my seller. Listen,
right.
I guess I would describe it in the context of this if I was going to do it, like just off the top of my head.
Sure.
This is a fine line that I'm talking about, right? So I don't want you to get any impression here if I'm pushing you either way, right?
Right.
But there's a concept in real estate called steering,
right.
and this says A, B, C, D, and E.
Right.
Okay. Now that's for real, and I think you can understand why. We're talking about humans. Humans are, that's the way they are.
Yep.
And there could be some confirmation bias or whatever you're talking about, but that's the way they are. Now I want to say that, but I also want to say to you as a fiduciary that this is a real problem. And I need to tell you that, but I hate saying that because that could be also construed of me steering you somewhere.
Right.
Right. So I would have to kind of do all of that, but the nefarious agent, the agent, whatever, it's just a ploy. Right. It's just a script that they've written themselves that they could, nudge and wink their way into what they want to get out there. So without knowing the intent, the heart of the person speaking that, and I don't know how you fucking gauge that. That's a tough line to walk there, Rob.
Right.
I mean,
and I agree. I do think this is a tough one. Right. So I think my response back to, my
so if Lamakia is like, if he's inelegant,
right,
in his delivery, right, that can be construed as a whole different way. But I mean, how do you tell somebody your delivery is not? It's a delivery thing, like you said, right? Yeah. So, but how do you? I mean, people communicate in different ways. I mean, some people don't like the way that I, maybe use too much curse words, or I do whatever.
I know people don't like how much F-bombs I drop on this podcast.
Right. So it's like, but I mean, I know you're a sincere person. You're an educated person. Yeah. It's not like you're using curse words because you're like ignorant, right? It's just, it's the way you are. I mean, so there could be a possibility that some of the things that Lamakia or anybody, not to pick on him, the way they deliver things sounds like kind of slimy when he doesn't really mean to be. That's just the way he communicates, right? So, man, I don't know, dude. I mean, it's a tough one.
Sure. And I think, look, we know that there are areas, especially in real estate practice, where words matter and the way you deliver words really, really matter. Fair housing comes to mind. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, you can't just be like, I'm going to just say whatever. Like, you can't do that. Like, fair housing is an area where you need to pick your words carefully. You need to think about it. And if your intent is clear, you can't just be like, oh, you don't want to send your kids to that school. Like, like, you better be real fucking careful about how you say that, right?
Yeah. Well, we saw in the Long Island case, right?
Sure.
You know what I would do is I would go and I would hang out at I would go by that 7-Eleven at 11 o'clock at night. And you just tell me what you see.
Right.
Like, so those little fucking.
But see, but that, in a way, like, when she said that in that video, right? Like, what's her intent? What is she really trying to tell the guy? It's pretty clear what she was really trying to tell the guy, right?
Yeah.
It's not the words, right? But you can't be like, I don't know. You can't be like, hey, I'm just, being real. Like, hey, man, like, if you buy that house, there going to be a whole bunch of Chinamen around you. Like,
right.
Maybe you don't mean to say, right?
That. Yeah.
But the words you use, the way you deliver that is going to have a real difference versus, hey, in that neighborhood, so it's a very diverse neighborhood and some of your neighbors are going to be and even then you want to be real careful. Are you violating fair housing? Yeah. You know what I mean? To me, this situation of the steering versus fiduciary duty is one of those situations, right? And I do think it's highly fact specific, right? So the example that I would use with over at least over email was, say you're in Colorado. Colorado has state forms, right? It has state forms, and the state form has an option where it says like the buyer is not responsible for any compensation, right? So if I'm a listing agent in Colorado, maybe the way I have to put it is, hey, so Mr. Seller, let's just go through. There is an aspect of this I'm going to, walk through with you. In this state, we have these three options for buyer agency, right? And I would have to have some stats. I would have to have some real figures. 80% of buyer agents agreements signed in Colorado use the third option where the buyer is not responsible in any way. But there's 20% where the buyer is on the hook unless they can get compensation from the seller, right? So, if you choose not to offer, which you can, and I'm not advising you one way or the other to offer it or not, but if you do, I need you to be aware that 20% of the buyers may look at your house and be like, oh, that's going to cost me more money. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's that. And then there's, hey, man, you better offer compensation or see how many buyers show up. Like, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah. And to be fair, even if you like, hey, man, as your fiduciary, I have to tell you that, if you don't offer compensation, there are some lawsuits, there are some stats out there that say that you might not get as many buyers as you would normally.
Sure.
I mean, that's like, it's a word police there, but man, I don't know, man, that's threading a needle big time.
It is. So, which is why it's so sensitive, right?
Yeah.
Which I hate. I just hate all of this entire thing. I'm not a fan of the settlement, but it is what it is. It is what we have. I do think that as a listing agent, if your intent is the right intent, if your goal really is not to try and get the seller to pay more, if your goal is simply to explain to the seller, just like if you don't upgrade the roof, it means this. Hey, your roof is 15 years old. It's a little, right? It's a little iffy. This is not trying to get you to pay, buy some roofing services, right? This is just me doing my job as your agent to say what this likely means is we're going to have to give concessions during the closing or whatever, right? Maybe it has to be phrased in that type of way. Certainly, though, I do believe if you make it as if you don't offer agent compensation, then buyers aren't going to show up. That to me is like you're on the steering side of the equation. If instead you put it at a minimum as, look, you're either going to have to offer the buyer something, right, to offset this potential cost, or offer to pay the buyer agent, or offer to throw in a free roof, or what I mean? Like you could cut that in many, many different ways. If you only phrase it as, if you don't offer to pay the buyer's agent something, people aren't going to show up.
Yeah.
That,
so if you wrap it into other things, right?
Here are multiple options, right? Because one of the ways this could happen, Mr. Seller, is they send in an offer and request that you pay them 2.5%, or you pay their agent 2.5%, whatever. And then we can compare all of those offers, right? And see which one you like.
It seems like there should be, in this case, kind of like we had COVID, where we came up with a form.
Okay.
Right. To be a disclosure of like, that, hey, fucking, DOJ, write the goddamn, what do you want? Tell me how, so that I can I'll put that, I'll sign it. The thing signs it. So it's very clear.
Right.
It's in the language that you fucking give a shit about.
Right.
And we can go on from there. If they ask about any one of these, what do you mean new roof? Well, look at the roof. I mean, what about this? Okay. Right. Now they're asking, for whatever, but, maybe it's that kind of thing where it's not all we need is more fucking forms, but
right. Maybe, but like I said, I genuinely think that the better agents, right, the ones who are actually doing the right thing. Again, if you go to your intent, if your heart is sort of in the right place, and you're just trying to do right by the seller,
right? I
don't think you use the type of language that could be over the line. Do you know what I mean? I think you just lay it out for them. Right.
Yeah. Well, but there's not a lot of people. I mean, they're better agents, sure. But I mean, how do we get the lesser agents to do the right thing? Right. So they should
probably join the better agents teams, or, their broker should, educate them.
This seems like what NAR should exactly is for, right?
You would think.
Give me the guide, give me the best practices, give me the policy
right.
to manage the balancing of fiduciary responsibility and steering.
Right.
Right.
No, you would think. And that would be useful, right?
Yeah.
That would be useful.
Yeah.
Instead, we have a clown show, the broker liaison. Like that's the shameful part of this. But I do think for people who are listening, talk to your brokers. And for brokers, talk to your attorneys, right? Because what I'm pretty confident of is the threat of steering is steering. I'm also equally confident doing a fiduciary duty as the listing broker and informing your customer, your client, the seller, as to possible consequences of things. That is 100% legal. And in fact, that's your duty. You should be doing that. Obviously, the wording, the delivery, the language use, all of that is going to matter. Not being a broker, not being, your attorney, I'm not going to tell you what that is. But that's the conversation.
It just seems like it should be systematized, though, right? It should be.
I think it would be really helpful. I think we have some real leaders in the industry who I think could probably help out with something like that. I'm thinking about some of the better coaches that are out there. Some of the brokers that are out there. I brought up Sharon Srivatsa, the president of Real, when he talked about the settlement and the compensation piece. Maybe it's something like that, right? Maybe it's a longer video, whatever. But like, realistically, walking through a look, if your heart's in the right place and you're trying to do right by your client, I think 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to be okay. Right? Again, if your heart's in the right place, it's going to be highly specific to your locale, right? Because you have to take into account things like state law, maybe local regulations, right? You're going to have to do it that way. I think you're going to want some stats. That's the other thing. Like, you don't want to just go and tell your seller, even if you're trying to do the right thing, to say, hey, here are some possible consequences. You should probably have some idea, right? As to like what percentage of buyers in our market sign this type of agency agreement versus that type. What are the different, you know what I mean? Like, and maybe it's too early at this point. We don't have those stats.
Yeah.
Then you say that, hey, Mr. Seller, we don't really have any stats. This is brand new. So we don't know, but there's a chance that some buyers are going to have signed some type of agency agreement that puts them on the hook for 3%. In that scenario, here are multiple things that could happen, right?
Yeah.
Now, one way that maybe we get around all this is just offer compensation up front. Right. You're not required to, I don't know if it's not a recommend, it's like, well, what do you think I should do? There's so many different ways, right? Because you could always just hold out, see what kind of offer they come in, and then negotiate it. You could offer it up front, right? Like I said, if you're acting in the best interest of the seller client, I think that's the way most rational, normal people would go about that conversation, right? And that's why I'm making such a big deal of like the whole, you better offer compensation or buyers are going to show up. Like, dude, that's steering. Don't do that, right? Do the right, like think about your client and do the right thing that way.
Yeah,
right?
It's nuance matters. I mean, it's hard to it's hard to kind of teach or for people to understand different nuance, right? So
yeah. But at the same time, while nuance matters, if you use certain types of language, if you communicate that in a certain way, it's like it's not that nuanced.
Yeah, but I mean, again, if somebody doesn't know, talking to a Southern, when they say, bless your heart.
Sure.
Well, that sounds really nice. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but it is not.
It's not nice.
Right? So again, the only way not the only way, I just think this needs to be systemized in a fucking form or a document that's, okay, I'm going to go over fucking form 1099-5, right? A. And this is just all the things that could happen here. We want to disclose to you next.
Sure. Right? And what? I think that's the sort of thing where maybe, like I said, some of the better coaches, some of the better leaders out there should probably put something together.
And it's like, why aren't we getting offers? Well, let's go back to, there's this form here that had a lot of things. Okay. Condition to the house. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait a second. Yeah. Look at number 3. Right. We didn't offer any compensation to the buyer. You didn't want to do that. Okay. Right. Maybe that's a possibility why we're not getting as many offers is the one across the street. Right. So yeah, I mean, there's different ways of handling it. No, I'm glad you brought that up because it's very, very, very complicated. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Like I said, I wanted to rescue something of value from, from the clown show that is happening. And And I do think that is valuable. I do think that is something worth really talking about. And my suspicion, like I said, man, I bet if we were to like get some of those leaders on the show and ask them right now, I think they would start with, if your heart's in the right place and you're actually trying to do the right thing for the seller, right? Chances are you're not going to fall into the other side, right? Of where you're going to just like use the threat of steering as a way of chances are. So I do think that, like, you could maybe put it in elegantly, maybe you put it, but if your heart's in the right place, like, look, I'm really just trying to do what's right for you, Mr. Seller. I don't think you get in a bad place, basically, right? Whereas if your heart is really in, how do I squeeze this motherfucker for every dime he's got, then you could put it elegantly. You're still going to end up in the bad place in a way, I think. Right?
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah. I don't know how you prove to a judge that your heart was in the right place.
That's true. No, that is entirely true. And that's where maybe forms and scripts and those things would be really useful. And here's the thing, though. I think training is helpful, right? Because keep in mind, the reason why KW and Remax and a lot of these companies got in trouble, why they got sued in the first place, because they had training materials. And the script was, what do I do when the seller says your commission is very high? What you say is, look, I charge 2%, but if you don't offer 3% to the other guy, then they're not going to show your house. That's what got them in trouble, right? Fine. So now the scripts going forward will be, listen, you're doing what's right for the seller, right, as the fiduciary of the seller. Here are some suggested talking points. Here's the script. Let's walk through all the different ways. Here are your options. Let me explain and why, blah, 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 blah. Done. Maybe that's what needs to happen. But that's what needs to happen, right? Some considerate awareness of that fine line. And is it any different than fine lines with fair housing? Right? Is it any different than, that when you're disclosing something you shouldn't, right? Because it's confident, it's a breach of confidentiality versus trying to encourage people, right, to make offers.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And again, I think agents,
if the bad ones that do this over and over are going to get caught and
they're going to get
called out for it.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool, man. See, we rescued something positive.
I like it.
Oh man. Let's leave it there. I mean, we could keep going, but why?
No, I think it's a positive thing to all these things to talk about. And maybe somebody listening can figure this fucking shit out.
And and if you do, please let us know. Maybe we'll have you on the show to come to kind of tell us what you're doing. Although maybe that should wait a few months to see. Like, it'd be great to, hey, you're really successful with this, right?
Yeah.
And then I think next week, man, I'm working on something. I found out something that I'm like,
ooh, the big tease here, huh?
So I'll kind of give you what the topic is, and then maybe we could have our listeners tell us. What do you do when the buyer is a scumbag?
Okay. Leave it at that.
We'll just leave it at that, right? Because all this time we've been beating up on agents, right? Beating up on brokers. Okay, but what do you do when the buyer is a total scumbag?
I love that. Okay.
So look for that next week. If you are listening, you watch to the end, and you have some stories you want to share with us, you know how to get a hold of us. We want to explore
right in the comments.
That's right.
And smash that button and click on that.
Yeah, I don't know how far we are from getting to 1,000. We'd like to get to 1,000. If you've listened all this way, give us a hand. Click that subscribe button. Awesome. Thanks everybody. Ciao.
Listen, content is everything. Two Brothers Creative makes it look easy. Right now, business owners really only have two options. The first option is hire a big firm. Now, this big firm's going to come in, make you think that they invented all the algorithms, and start charging you thousands of dollars every month. You don't want to do that. Second option is to do it yourself. Well, that means you got to learn SEO, SEM, copywriting, marketing techniques on the web. You should be really focusing on your own product. But now there's a third option. It's called Content in a Box. Give Two Brothers Creative 30 minutes a week and they'll handle everything. Plus, they'll show you how to bring it in-house later on. They'll rebuild your marketing foundation and give you tools and techniques and a new marketing playbook that'll actually produce real results and help you grow your business. Two Brothers Creative will give you the confidence and know-how to tell the SEOs and SEMs and all those other acronyms to get fucked. You're in control now. Get started today at thecontentbox.com.